So we're live, and welcome to the High Performance Leadership series with Accelerate. I'm Shane Gallen from Accelerate, and I'm delighted to welcome Jenny Wood. So over the next 45 minutes, Jenny will share her experience, insights, and passion about how you can build high-performing teams and organizations. And Jenny's from Skipton Group, so Jenny's the CIO for the group, and brings a unique blend of board level experience, operational excellence, and deep technology leadership. So let's get started. Jenny, welcome.
Thanks, Shane. Really pleased to be here.
Yeah, likewise. So let's touch into some of the transformations you've led. So in the UK, and across Australia, you've led some of the most complex transformations. How do you approach innovation in highly regulated spaces?
Thanks, Shane. I think what's really important when you think about transformation is the why. What are you here for? What are you trying to do?
Mm,
And when you think about the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, the work tends to flow behind that, because often the technology piece is the easy piece. The hard piece is the culture, it's the ways of working, it's the teams that you bring together, and making sure that you're actually solving the right problems. And through my career, I've had the privilege of working with lots of different leaders who've helped me understand how to do that, but also across a wide range of different industries where the problems have all been different. But the fundamental question to ask is, what are we really trying to achieve, and what's the problem we're trying to solve?
I know we were just talking briefly before the session about working together. One of the key things with working with you, Jenny, was that question of like the so what, like why are we building this, and really helping people and teams think about that. Um, so,
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, Shane,
mm,
because I've had times early in my career where we built stuff, and you got a bit confused as to why no one was as excited about it as you were, or why, when you've done something that you put a lot of effort into, but actually it doesn't get the results. And often what's happened is we haven't answered the right question. We haven't talked to our customers or our colleagues about the things that are important. We've had people who think they know, or we haven't had the right data. And then you work really hard to get to the end, and then you all feel a little bit deflated, and that's not where I want any team to be.
no, definitely not. So in terms of really um staying ahead of what's happening, and particularly in today's environment where we've got AI everywhere, how do you stay ahead of what's next in tech whilst, keeping things grounded in real customer needs?
So, but for me, I do lots of listening and reading. I work down in Skipton, and so I spend a little bit of time transiting. I go down, and I do a lot of listening to podcasts. I look at what's happening in industry. I've just last week had the privilege of spending some time with a group of CIOs talking about what's on CIOs' minds, because it's all very well to talk to vendors and through to the teams that are doing huge amounts of innovation, which is really needed, so you know what the products can do and what the art of the possible is. But actually, that practicality of what's working and what's in use and what are you seeing come out of it's really important. I spend lots of time talking with my team, um, understanding what they think's important, but also time listening to customers, and in our case to our members, because Skipton's a mutual, about what's really important for them, because they'll tell us in many cases some of the things that they need. Doesn't mean that there won't be innovation from the inside, but they'll also tell us the problems they've got to solve. And that thinking about the problems we've got to solve then makes it easier to use some of the new tech and we're seeing underlie it. Example where it's one of our purpose for being is to help more people into homes. We've done a lot of work with data on first homeowners and how we think about products and how we think about an index that helps people understand where they need to buy. That sort of innovation with data and AI is where you start seeing that really nice confluence between customer need, member need, and actually how you get the best out of technology. And so it's thinking like that makes a difference.
It's really bringing like that's like not just context from internal, but out, like external to your organization, connecting with your customers, and using both like quantitative and like actual qualitative data. Mm. Um, in terms of like where you've worked, so you've worked across the UK and Australia, with quite large organizations. What's the consistent across like the teams that you've seen that are high performing, no matter what the market is?
It's people and it's having a real purpose people can get behind. And it doesn't have to be in some ways, it doesn't have to be a lofty purpose or something that's big or going to fundamentally transform the world. I've seen high performing teams who've worked together to a common goal, knowing what they can do to deliver that. They've delivered it together in the right way and actually celebrated at the end, even though it may be something that wasn't necessarily the most exciting thing to do, be it ranging from decommissioning old system. I got some experience very early on in my career during some bank acquisitions of having to help teams shut down systems that they'd built with love and care. And you can do that as a team and get people behind it if you understand the purpose, you understand what you're there for, and you acknowledge and accept where everyone's coming from, but also the rationale and the reason why we're going to end up in the position that we're in. Right through to some of the transformations around ways of working and learning. And so the agile work that I did at both Telstra and at NatWest, all of that was around how we line people up behind the right outcomes, and we give them the ability to iterate and learn to deliver the best things that they possibly can. So for me, it's people, and it's having that clear set of goals and purpose that you're heading towards. And back to
Yeah,
Dan Pink's autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
that think. Yeah, yeah. Um, that's a great book actually. Um, it's so interesting you talking about like high performance, even for the stuff that's might not seem glamorous or like exciting. So like that decommissioning of old systems, as a like I feel like people might often think high performance is about being at the cutting edge and delivering stuff in that space. So when I think about like transformation at scale, what's your philosophy when it comes to leading large scale digital transformation programs or other types of transformation programs?
So, so for me, you've got to know where you're going, and
Mm.
it's got to be customer or colleague led. Too often we think it's about the technology that you put in play. The technology is just a tool, and once you know the right things, it suddenly becomes easier to deliver. So, large scale transformation programs need to spend enough time exploring what are we actually here to achieve, getting alignment between the teams, thinking about how you leverage the strengths of the teams. Have you got the right people in play? Have you got the right support? I've previously led led transformation programs where executive support wasn't there, and it makes it so hard, or where the executive abrogated their accountabilities to the team and said, it's your job to run the transformation. I'm really lucky in my current organization. My CEO is a fundamental believer in the way that we work and about being member and colleague led with very clear sets of goals. He and I argue about who's going to be first to our planning days with the teams, so that you can get to the work of your people and understand what's happening and what the blockers are and how you do it. And so you've got to be clear on where you're going. You've got to be supported from the top, and you've got to actually then enable people to do the things they need to do and plan it out in a way that they own the plan and they own the achievement, because otherwise you don't have space to iterate and learn and pivot. One of the biggest challenges, and this is still a challenge I work through, is that path to value. Because you can't wait forever on large transformation programs to get value out of them. And so how do you get that right balance of early value with the right foundational work? And that means you've got to spend some time with your teams thinking about it and planning it out, so that you do have the right things in play. One of the things that we've worked through over the last couple of planning increments with Skipton. So we, at the Building Society, we plan our entire investment portfolio. And so we bring about 450 people together to have a conversation end to end about what we're doing. And in fact, they did it last week and I wasn't there. So I'm feeling quite devastated that I missed it. But through that, we get a chance to raise some of those more structural things. So we recognized we needed to do some work on how we get test environments up front. We recognize that if we don't have the right business knowledge in the streams of work, that you can't execute what you need to do, and you've got to have the right resources and capacity. When I first joined, we worked out that we were trying to do too much, and actually slowing down to speed up was critically important. And so rather than waiting, what we said was under plan. Pull work forward if you need to, but under plan. So when you're doing that large scale transformation, it really starts top down strategy. And then once you've got your chunks of what value you want to deliver, really allowing your teams to deliver it in an iterative way.
A nice philosophy. Everything from I'm seeing a bit of a thread here around purpose, being people are customer focused, making sure you have that alignment, and really making it easy for the teams, I suppose, to deliver that value on the path to value. So with transformation, cost reduction is always part of the conversation. What advice would you give leaders that are starting this journey and maybe thinking about cost reduction, but helping them think about doing this without losing value?
Yeah, having worked in big companies and small companies, early in my career, I worked for a small telco, and we weren't returning to our shareholder the amount of capital that they put into us. And that was, for me, a really eye-opening learning about how you truly think about what you're spending your money on and what's really going to be important. I think that too often when we think about cost, we don't end up with transparency. And you need to understand what you're spending your money on and where it's delivering value, and then have a conversation around what that sweet spot is. Is it something where you're willing to spend money and get business capability or functionality, or invest in innovation? And we're seeing many companies do that in terms of data and AI at the moment, where you're sort of investing ahead of the curve. Or are you at the point where you're actually needing to see some tangible returns from what you've done, or you end up cluttering up your environment? So, one of the most interesting conversations I ever had with somebody was about introducing a new telco product. And they had two products in market, and we said to them, are you going to add a third? And they went, no, it just adds too much complexity. You think about the call center complexity, you think about the technology complexity, pricing complexity. So, we're going to stick with our two products, and we're just going to make sure they're the best they can be, because extra stuff adds complexity. And the same goes when you don't take stuff out of environments. When you don't really close down products, or take that complexity away. So I've run programs before where we've worked to get rid of old tech, or we've worked to get rid of old products. And when you look at the return on investment, it's around simpler knowledge bases, simpler call centers, queries, simplifying the interaction with customers. And sometimes you won't get rid of everything, but even just getting that mindset of constant cleanup's really important. And then when it comes to managing technology costs, I'm a fundamental advocate of technology business management, which is all about thinking about where you get your value. And there is really a sweet spot between doing the right things for customers and actually spending money in the right areas. We were launching some products in one of the telcos I worked in, and our customers told us they wanted a lower spec product. And we'd quoted that at millions of dollars to deliver, Australian dollars, because just being clear on that one.
Yeah.
And we thought, should we really do this? Because do they really know what they're asking for? And so we did some experimentation, and actually we discovered that out of the 5 customers we tried it with who desperately told us they wanted a cheaper product, none of them wanted that cheaper product at the end. They decided that the cost to their business versus the cost of what they were paying was actually the right thing. And so we saved ourselves building a product that customers didn't want. So, not only is the what are you spending, it's the how you choose what you add and how you choose what you invest. So all of those things come into a world when you start looking at technology cost management. And it's complex because all the licensing hits you, and all the cloud costs, and all of the transaction costs. And you've really just got to have the right disciplines to know and be transparent on where you're getting the value from them, and be ruthless about shutting them down and
Mm.
holding yourselves to account for closing them down.
It's interesting you mentioning like that kind of upstream impact from a cost perspective, or maybe like a loss of value. It's probably not always considered when that initial decision's been being made.
Cost of complexity. Imagine how many people look at service levels and contracts and
Mm,
process invoices for technology, when you're just looking at that side, let alone the number of lines in knowledge management systems, and
mm,
the number of people who go and try and track stuff down when something goes wrong. Yeah, I've had the privilege of running some operational teams in my life, and what they taught me was actually the importance of, beyond agile, going to the work of the delivery work your teams are doing. Go to what your customers are feeling. Go to what the people using your systems are feeling. Because too often we focus a lot on the big transformation, and some of the really small things make a fundamental difference,
mm,
um, because they're the things that your customers feel, and they're the things that add volume to your organization. And actually, if you can truly listen and get rid of some of those, and the same goes for your people. We don't design colleague journeys very well. We design HR journeys and finance journeys, and that the end to end. If you can truly crack helping your people do their jobs and helping your
mm,
customers do what adds value to them, you will hit that sweet spot of cost reduction. Um,
mm. It's interesting, just like making it easier for the people in the teams and making it easier for your customer. Being laser focused on that, and seeking out those small but like really impactful changes or improvements. Mm. So what does success look like for you, beyond just delivery on time and delivery on budgets?
I, I love to see my people grow. Um, Nothing makes me smile more than seeing someone get promoted or moving on. So success to me looks like people do things that they never imagined they can do. That we've created the space as leaders for people to be their best, or to realize that they want to go and do something different sometimes, because sometimes that's where people end up, and giving them the power and control to choose to do that. Um, in business terms, success looks like we've done what we set out to achieve for our customers and our colleagues. And if I come to where I am at Skipton, And we're very clear, and we're very lucky because we're a mutual, which means that we're owned by our members, and we can make some slightly different decisions to what you might make if you were a shareholder company. We've got three key things that we're focused on, which is getting more people into homes, making people's money work, and making membership matter. And for us, that feedback, when you go to your AGM and your members tell you that something really worked for them, or that we've helped more people into homes, where we're launching products that perhaps others won't because they're bigger, and
Mm.
we're not after some of this. We don't need some of the scale that some others need, but we can launch some niche products that truly give people the chance to buy homes. Those sorts of things really make me feel like we've done our jobs well, because that's sort of what we're here for. And that's what the mutual's here for. It's to help our members achieve what they're after.
That's it's a really nice like 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 purpose.
They're simpler. We
Yeah.
do simple things. So Skipton's
Mm,
got 5 companies as a part of it. We've got our building society. We've got Connells, who's the largest real estate agent group in the UK. We've got Jade, who's a software company. We've got an international bank, and we've got a business finance arm. So we're not we're not small. If you looked at us, we'd be a FTSE 80 or a FTSE 90. But
mm,
because of the nature of our business, we're actually quite able to make some of those calls and to be more nimble on what we do than some of the larger financial institutions, or some of the larger institutions in the other areas that we work within.
mm. And that's you're solving like really really purposeful challenges that we're seeing at the minute. So I see the look on your face and the smile and stuff. It's yeah, it sounds like you're having a great time at Skipton.
I'm having a fabulous
Yeah.
time. I'm loving the team. I walked into an environment where all of the things that, when you talk about digital transformation, I've got lined up. I've got a CEO who's passionate about customers and recognizes that digital and tech are a key part of that. I've got um, business value streams, in technical terms, that come in from the business and are run and owned by the CEOs of the business units. I've had a team who's kept the tech environment relatively simple and clean. So architecturally, we've got the capability and the flexibility to do the things we need to do. And we were about 12 months on an agile journey, that it's probably 2 years on an agile journey that kicked off before I got there,
Mm,
um, where we were starting to practice the things we needed to do, and the leadership team's been practicing with the teams, and we're willing to iterate and learn in a way that lets our people iterate and learn. And we haven't got it all right. And some people want to move faster, and some people want to move slower. And sometimes we're still not doing the right work. But we're willing to just keep iterating and learning. And we've got that culture and environment that's allowing us to do that. And so it really is an environment that's giving me the chance to bring together everything I've learned, because I learned a huge amount at NatWest from working with some really amazingly talented people, both on the work we did on Agile and in helping the tech teams do what they did. The bringing together the work I did at Telstra on digital transformation, and the work we did on Agile, and prior to that, sort of, in the smaller telco, APT, and at Westpac. So it's really nice at this stage in my career to be able to bring all of those things together and
mm.
help an organization really live to a purpose.
So you've touched on a number of things there in terms of like creating an environment where people can feel inspired to experiment and innovate. What else would you add if if you're to find a list on how to do that?
So for me, it's all about learning, and it's about,
Mm,
to come back to the cliches, it's around psychological safety. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, how many times do you feel like your leaders really got your back? And I look back through my career, and actually, I've been really lucky. I've probably never really doubted that my leaders had my back. Sometimes it's been complex, and sometimes the environments have been focused on different outcomes. But that security of knowing that your leaders are there to help you learn when you get it wrong is
Mm,
fundamentally important. And I think back to early in my career where I really stuffed something up and I brought a system down. And you know, I was my own worst enemy. And my boss let me fix it and worked to insulate me from the fallout about how this had happened. And then the next day he said to me, "So what have you learned?" And I had this whole list of stuff that I'd learned. You know,
mm.
the big thing I learned was that security of knowing that you've got the space to learn and get it wrong is really, really, really important. Doesn't mean you're not accountable. Doesn't mean that you're not the one who will be the if you've not done the right thing, you need to learn from it, and you need to know how you not don't do that again. But knowing your boss has your back is really, really important, and you've got that psychological safety to learn is really important. And sometimes we get it right. Sometimes I get it right as a leader, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes catch myself going, and you go, breathe, take a step back. You know, but that open and honest transparency around how as a team you're going to solve a problem, and what you're going to be there for, and the ability to then have accountability that comes with that empowerment and that trust, really fundamental.
Yeah, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about the times that I've had that in my career as well. It's been so impactful for me, and you can see how impactful it is for everyone that experiences that as well. So we're getting into that sort of like that cultural space in terms of teams and people. What, you know, makes a transformation program stick versus maybe stall or slow down?
Yeah, so done lots of this. So projects or transformation programs or whatever you want to call them that are done to organizations tend to be the ones that don't stick. They tend to be faster. They tend to be the ones that hive someone off into a corner and then they come out and go, ta-da, here's a fabulous new thing we're going to give to you, and isn't it wonderful? Or we're going to roll out this new operating model or process, or they tend to be the ones that are harder to embed. Sometimes you need to do that because sometimes that is the way that the work has to get done. But they're the ones that are much harder to stick with. I think the ones that embed are the ones where the teams who own the work do the work and then actually are able to learn and iterate the work. Very coming to the agile type conversation, which is where you go to the work, and that's how you do it. And so it's slower because you have to bring people on the journey with you. You have to listen to lots of different opinions. It might deviate when you get a little bit down the line because someone's seen something new or learnt something new, and it might not be a straight line to get to the end outcome. But by the time you get to the outcome, you've actually probably got 66 to 80% of it going to stick versus what happens in traditional change programs where it's only a small piece that tends to be effective. I sort of learnt the hard way with some of this stuff when you'd get an idea and you'd sit down and you and your leadership team would go, here's what we need to do, or the business would go, here's what you need to do. You'd have a workshop and then you'd take it to the front line and the front line would go, yeah, but you didn't think about that. And you'd all go, oh yeah, but we can risk accept that, or we can manage that, or that's little in the scheme of things. I learned that really these changes and systemic changes have to happen in small doses and they have to gather people. and they have to gather momentum, a bit like the Fool on the Hill video. How
Just
do you
thinking about
get
that.
two or
Yeah.
three people moving along on the same journey? And what makes me smile is when 3 or 4 years after you've done something, someone uses one of the phrases back at you. Or, if I think about some of the work we did at NatWest, some of it didn't stick the first time we did it. But actually, when you look at where I saw stuff come back sometimes in terms of principles or in terms of phrases that people were using or tools and techniques that people picked up, and the same with Telstra, you could actually see that systemic embedding. And once you got that, you really have started to change organizations. And for me, that's how, when you're doing really large scale change, you need to focus on it. That doesn't help you roll out, a new app or a new portal, but I think in the same way, you've got that learning conversation around what is the most important thing and what's the fastest path to learning, and how do we bring a small group of people, and we're rolling out a new app and portal in the near future, and what's the smallest group of people that we can bring on board that are going to tell us whether we got it right or not, and then how
Mm,
do we then start building the capability in parallel to enhance that capability so that we can then iterate with the people who use it on the things that are most important for them, as well as our colleagues, based on the feedback they're getting. So for me, that's the fundamental when you're thinking about transformation around the characteristics of success. And then the final one's clarity. You've got
mm.
to know what you're trying to achieve, because otherwise you just wibble wobble around and don't really go anywhere. And that clarity has to come from the top of the organization, as well as the leaders who are trying to lead the change.
And so you keep coming back to like this purpose, like why we're doing it. It's making sure that you're engaging like the people and the customers that are impacted by these changes. And we just talked about like experimenting and innovating. That transformation space is definitely you're in the way you're describing it. You're kind of describing we should do it in an experimental way. Start small, get feedback, learn. We're essentially innovating how we work. And you're talking in that space around that psychological safety, like the generative culture characteristics. What's one thing that a leader can do tomorrow to boost that sort of trust that you need in that space, and also boost team resilience? Because when you've got all that change happening, it can be too much sometimes.
Yeah, you can't do it tomorrow. Um,
Yeah.
just saying. Um,
Yeah.
so the first thing you can do is start asking questions. Stop telling, start asking questions. There's some Turn the Ship Around's a fabulous book in
Mm,
just in terms of how leaders can start creating the space for their people, and how uncomfortable it is for leaders. You know, trust me, there doesn't a day go by when I don't sit in my head and go, I think I know the answer to that. Um, no, I'm going to say something. I'm going to go and ask a question, or I'm going to just leave some space
mm,
for my people to go away and learn and to think about it. And sometimes, and they come up with the answer I had in my head, and sometimes they don't. They come up with something that's even more more exceptional, or something that's thought about things that I didn't know. And so that shift into um, just leaving the space and creating that space for your people is probably the first thing that you can do. I think the other thing is that it feels really uncomfortable, because you're still accountable. I'm still accountable. I'm still the SMF 24 for the building society. And sometimes I'm not necessarily the person who makes every single decision every single part of the time, because you can't be. You've
mm.
got to have the right controls in place. You've got to have the right ability to see what's happening. And you know but it can get uncomfortable when you're letting other people go through thought process or processes that you might think that you can tell them. And so that leadership discomfort is also one to recognize and to run through. I think, for me, it ends up being about how you show up and how you create the the openness then for them to tell you when you got it wrong. I got something wrong pretty much two months after I started at Skipton. We were talking about performance, and I brought in a whole stack of cultural norms from previous other organizations I'd been in, expectations. I get a double whammy because I've worked in Australia and the UK, which are different, and then I've worked in finance and telco, which are different, um, and I assumed some stuff was in play, and sort of said, I know I want it done this way to my team, and 2 months in, they weren't comfortable enough to go to me. No, you shouldn't do that. Um, and didn't land well, and we had to turn around and just accept we didn't get it right, and we had to come back and do it again. Guarantee you that the next time they told me, we'd created a space where they went, no, 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 this is how you do it, and I'd learned to actually to wait and to give them the space as well. So those are the types of things that as leaders you can do that start getting to the point that you're there for your team, and you're the one who's helping them be successful as opposed to they're helping you be successful.
It's definitely like a paradigm shift. When you think about maybe some like traditional like leadership styles. So in terms of like your journey, what's been maybe a moment or maybe one of the most impactful moments for you in your career that's really changed how you lead?
Oh, it always comes when something goes wrong. I gave the example earlier of
Yeah.
I caused a problem, and you know someone had my back. That's
Mm,
a really important one. Um, there are so many little ones. I learned that how I show up reflects not just on my direct team, but the broader team. I can remember when I was in smaller telco, you know, I walked out of an exco meeting, and I don't know what I was thinking of. I was thinking about something, and I had my head down, and I walked to my office at that stage, because at that stage I had offices. So I seem to go through this point in my career where I had offices and then suddenly never had office since. But and then I'd sort of sat down. I think I'd closed the door, and I'd been thinking about something, and just gone on to, I think I was call listening or something, because I used to, at that stage, I was running the contact centers, not doing tech. And so when I had some spare time, I'd just do some call listening to hear what customers were actually saying, what our agents were experiencing. Um, and someone knocked on my door at about 2 o'clock and said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, yeah, I'm fine. What's up? And he said, well, the whole floor noticed you didn't say hello when you walked past. So they're all just a little bit worried you're not okay. And I thought, I didn't realize that as a leader, just being a little bit distracted could generate such a wave.
mm,
Um, and it's not that I made myself smile and say hello every time I walked in, but I was just much more conscious of the fact that the way I walked through a floor, the way it was probably when I first realized I was a leader, had an impact on the people around me. If I ask a question too fast, you know, it has an impact. So all of those sorts of things are things that I've learnt through the way. I think the biggest thing is really having doing what you enjoy. That helps. But on the other side of it is having an honest and open relationship with your boss and the people who work for you. Because if you've got that trust, you can pretty much hit everything together. And I've done some things where I've had to make really fabulous people redundant, and I've had to outsource things that you might not otherwise want to do. That having honesty and openness when we have those conversations about the why and about what's in your control and what's not in your control is really, really important.
it's interesting though, like the most defining moments are the ones that are like the most like challenging in your career and really shift you're approaching. It's interesting hearing you like having that realization. I'm a leader now. Just seeing that impact, that ripple effect of how one small thing can impact the rest of the team or teams. Um, so I've worked with you before, and I've heard you being described as dynamic, inclusive, visionary. I've definitely seen this. Which of those traits did you have to work the hardest at?
I'm a natural introvert, which it, most people don't notice. I go home and my husband does everything that involves talking to people.
Okay.
In the days when you had to call for takeaway food, that would be my husband's job.
Okay.
Um, and you know, so for me, that need to be open, to be a little bit extroverted, to be able to not just be comfortable in silence as a leader, because that can be quite um, disconcerting for people, has actually probably been the thing that I've worked hardest on. Being able to hold conversations like this and be open and transparent. I don't mind the open and transparent because I'm actually quite transparent. You know if things are working for me, if things aren't working for me. I very rarely got something hidden in my head that I'm not telling you. I'm a firm believer in transparency and honesty in those areas. But that ability to be extroverted, to be the one who thinks about, am I smiling? Have I had the right conversation? Did I react in the right way to that conversation? Is probably the learned behavior. Um, and it I've had years at it though, so now it probably looks quite natural. But
It
I,
definitely
I
is.
will finish this call and go and try and be silent for a while as I regather my energy. And I did lots of talking last week as well, and it's very similar. I go back to my hotel room and gather my energy and get ready to get up the next morning. But it's probably the biggest one. But thank you for those words, because that they are very lovely words, but they don't happen in isolation of the team that's there to support you as a leader.
Mm.
And I've been very, very lucky in all of my career to have fabulous teams around me that help create the things that I have sometimes led and sometimes I've helped deliver.
All right. So what still keeps you motivated after your career so far in transformational leadership to keep like I can maybe guess the answer to this just listening to everything that you've told me, but what is it that keeps you motivated? Um,
Yeah, I'm fundamentally curious. I love learning. I love trying new things. I like seeing new things. I like watching things grow. I like yeah, so I'm fundamentally curious. I could ask you a question about anything and be fundamentally interested in everything you have to say, whether it be um something to do with technology, customers, or whether it's how you grow plants in a garden, or something to do with history or travel or different cultures. I am a fundamentally curious person, and that can sometimes result in me asking far too many questions, and I've learned to not do that as well, because that can feel like an interrogation. And but I love learning, but learning isn't just about acquiring the knowledge, it's seeing the knowledge applied. And so for me, it's that learning with growth that gives me the things that motivate me. I also don't sit still very well, and so my kids say to me, "Can't you just sit down and watch the TV show without doing something else?" No, no, I don't sit still very well. I'm perpetually busy. In fact, I've got friends who'll holiday with me, but only if I only schedule one of the days. They can schedule the second day, and I schedule the third day. And they love the days I schedule, but they need the extra day to recover. So,
okay.
uh,
Uh, cool. Okay. Before we finish, Jenny, we've got some quick fire questions. So, um, let's get started with those. What's the one leadership habit that you swear by?
I'm pausing and asking a question
Okay,
and
creating.
listening to the answer. Not just asking the question so someone can tell me what I know, but listening to the answer.
Okay. Um, you mentioned podcasts, you like to read. What's a book or podcast that's changed the way you lead or think?
Oh, a book or a podcast. I liked Unlearn by Barry O'Reilly, but I haven't kept up with that recently. Um, I'm a fundamental. I love Otto Scharmer's U theory of complex problem solving, and that whole conversation in a business sense about unlearning and then coming back up the other side after you've really grounded in what you've unlearnt. It has been something that I've pretty much applied in most of the work I've done. And I was introduced to that actually when I was at Telstra, and they did a leadership development program where that they taught us about that for complex problem solving. How do you actually sometimes expand the space of the problem to make it
Mhm.
smaller? Um, I'm an avid science fiction slash fantasy reader. Um, I have my my go-tos in that space are generally the older ones. I grew up in the world of Asimov and Bradbury and Haldeman and those types of authors, and I love watching science fiction become science fact in some ways. Um,
It's
so
crazy seeing
as
that at the
I
minute. Yeah.
yeah, and look,
Yeah.
you think about I did my master's on call center routing to one-to-one personalization and concluded that the technology wasn't there to do that at that point in time. And you look at where we are now, when we're well and truly there, that type of piece, those types of pieces are in play. And so, it is lovely to watch that iteration, but also the fact that it doesn't end up the same way. It's not quite what someone
Mm.
imagined. It's that iterative learning as time's carried on that means that some things have happened in the way that the authors expected and some haven't. So, but that was supposed to be a rapid fire question, and I've
It's
talked.
supposed to be, yes. Yeah. Right. What's one digital trend that you think is maybe overhyped or potentially underrated?
Oh, I think they all happen at different times. So my answer is actually I think technology is overhyped, and what's underrated is what we can do with for people with technology.
Mm.
And that's a really nuanced answer because you at any point in time, you, there are fabulous technologies that can do fabulous things for us. And you take AI for example, there are fabulous things being done with AI,
Mm.
but sometimes we're not actually solving the problem that's going to add the biggest value from that. And I'll come back to some experience I had at one of the telcos I worked with, where we thought we'd make it easy for people to tell us they were late in paying their bill. And in doing that, we discovered that bad debt went up because actually what we'd done is we'd made too easy the wrong problem, because what they wanted to do was actually talk to us because they wanted to talk to someone about how they pay their bills better, not how they can pay their bill later.
Mm.
um, but we hadn't really listened in with the right technology. So for me, I think that actually applying technology to solutions too early versus actually really understanding how we can solve the systemic problems with some of the amazing tech that we've got, because it is fabulous. I never
Mm.
thought I'd live in this world. Um, I never knew, I started work without a PC on my desk. Um, without, I had email addresses at university. And I remember actually the first time I saw IRC, that's dating me, and, saw people chatting to people in universities around the world. The world's become a much, much bigger and smaller and amazing
Mm.
place since those days. But with it comes complexity.
Already. So what's your favorite way to switch off and recharge?
It is generally history podcasts, I have to say.
Okay.
You know, I'm or some podcast that teaches me something that I don't know. I read books avidly, so I'm reading Julian Barnes' book I picked up the other day. Yeah, I'll take the dog for a walk. I'll Lego. I like my Lego. You can tell I like my Lego.
Oh yeah.
Like my Lego flowers. Watching a good movie, being with friends, you know, small, lovely group of friends, just connecting, chatting about the world, all of those sorts of things.
Okay. And finally, what advice would you give someone early in their tech leadership journey, or even any leadership journey?
You can probably guess this one. Be curious and be adaptable. Be willing to give things a go. Some of the best experience I got was from from roles that I didn't think were going to be the most fun role to do. So again, dating myself, I did Y2K testing for a bank. I learned so much about the way that the operations of banks work and how you bring stuff together and those types of things that have foundationally come in play in my career as I've gone through different roles. Um, I never imagined that from running billing for a small telco, I'd go to sitting on the executive and running all of customer operations. They gave me billing because it was a problem to solve, and I actually ended up running customer operations and HR for that telco, which included credit and a whole raft of things. And all of that's been because I was just willing to do something that I could do my best at and see where it took me. And I'm not saying don't be deliberate, but I am saying be open to the things to what you might learn from the opportunities that are given to you. And that then helps you be broader, which then helps you work out where you're going to go as you head up the career pyramid, if that's your goal. Or it
Mm.
helps you work out what roles you want to do, because you might actually work out you like one of those roles, or work out you hate it. But it just helps you as you go through that career journey to understand.
Being able to at least cross things off that I don't want to do that, or acquire like this knowledge or skill as you go on through your career. It's yeah, I've definitely seen that's beneficial myself.
That's what I actually say to people: work out what roles you don't want versus what roles you do want. Because if you
Mm,
work out what role you do want, there's probably only one of them. If you work out what roles you don't want, then there's probably some commonality across the rest that give you your next learning or your
mm,
next career move, and you're leaving your doors open.
mm.
And as you leave your doors open, you end up with more choice and you end up with more control over your career. So that's one of the career tips I give people when they come talk to me about careers.
It's a great tip. Well, Jenny, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for taking time out today to join us and grab some time now to decompress afterwards. Before we do finish, what's the best way for people to engage with you online?
So if you link in,
Yeah.
mention in the comment, don't do it blindly.
Mm.
Mention in the comment that you've attended and you've got a question. And I'll try and go through if there's any questions on the feed. Shane, I'll try and go through and have a look. I'm on a train this afternoon, so I've got a little bit of time. So I'll go and do that.
Not a problem. Well, folks, for everybody that's joined live, thank you, and Jenny, thanks again. It's been a pleasure. Folks, we've got Karina Bernacki from CoreWeave coming up next on the series, and then Christian Idioti from the Silicon Valley product group after that. So if you're interested, please go and register. We really appreciate all support that you're giving us with this live series. So thanks, folks.
Thanks a lot, Shane. Thanks to everyone for watching.
Singing to me, yeah. Screaming lyrics like they're soldiers.